This is Masayoshi Yokoyama, the guy who has written and continues to write most of the games in the Yakuza series. That's not to say that he's the only member of RGG Studio to have written stories in these games. For example, the spin-off series, Judgment, was mainly written by Nagoshi. But Yokoyama-san is the main guy. The beautiful mess that is Yakuza 5? You can thank Yokoyama-san for that. Rubber Bullets? You can thank Yokoyama-san for that. The captivating crime thriller that is Yakuza 0? You can thank Yokoyama-san for that. All of the oddities, laughably bad plot twists, and moments of greatness? You can thank this dude. If you haven't surmised it yet, the quality of writing in this series varies greatly. And the character, Haruka Sawamura, is very exemplary of that fact. More so, the worst aspects of the series' writing. So I hope you have your popcorn ready and a drink on the side because this is gonna be a long one. And the reason for that is because in this video, we examine the evolution of this character from beginning to the supposed end. Let's analyze Haruka Sawamura from her first appearance in Yakuza 1 to her latest appearance in Infinite Wealth. Roll the tape! Let's start with her origin story. Haruka's mother was Yumi Sawamura, Kiryu's only true love whenever he can't remember the events of Yakuza 2, which is pretty much all the time until Infinite Wealth. Before her death, they had known each other since early childhood, since they grew up in the same orphanage. The orphanage where the children of those that Shintaro Kazama assassinated resided in. Yeah, Yakuza 1's story was pretty dark, even for this series. Anyhow, the events of the year 1995 pretty much changed the course of both Kiryu's and Yumi's lives forever. Kiryu's family patriarch, Sohei Dojima, decides to sexually assault Yumi after kidnapping her. Luckily, he isn't successful, with Nishiki shooting his rapist ass. Sadly, this event and experience is so traumatic for Yumi that she loses most of her memory. She's admitted into a hospital that she eventually runs away from back to the orphanage she grew up in. The orphanage calls Shintaro Kazama, who then takes custody of Yumi. At a later point in time, she meets a man named Kaihei Jingu, a high-status politician. They both fall in love with each other, beginning a relatively short relationship. Yeah, that's right, this relationship doesn't last long, as a proposition for Jingu to marry the Prime Minister, the Japanese Prime Minister's daughter, is given to him. And he's one power-hungry motherfucker, so he's like, fuck y'all to Yumi and his newly born daughter, Haruka, and fucks off to marry the Prime Minister's daughter. Yes, you heard that right. This piece of shit is Haruka's father, and was a part of the whole reason Haruka was born in the first place. And because, you know, he's a politician and he just did something very scandalous, it presents an opportunity for a sensationalist reporter, who then catches wind of this, who then proceeds to use his infidelity as blackmail against him. Before he can do the blackmail, Jingu orders an assassin to kill him. To prevent something like this from happening again, Jingu comes up with the bright idea of murdering his former lover and his newly born child. Remember, this guy is Haruka's biological father. Obviously, he doesn't do the assassination himself. He orders his Yakuza partner, Sarah, to do it. Fortunately, this assassination plot is stopped in its tracks by Shintaro Kazama. The attempted assassination on her life suddenly triggers Yumi to regain her memories, taking her out of her amnesia. Yumi takes on a new identity and goes into hiding, placing Haruka in Sunflower Orphanage in order to keep her safe from any more assassination attempts from her father. She pretends to be Mizuki, Yumi's younger sister, and under her false name, works at a bar called Ares, staying close to Haruka, who she visits at the orphanage frequently. All of this happening for the first 10 years of Haruka's life. The first scene we see Haruka in starts with some footage of Kiryu beating up other Yakuza at the Tojo clan headquarters, playing on a mega screen TV in public. The scene then cuts to a shot of a little girl watching the news broadcast. At this point in the game, the player doesn't actually know who Haruka is. She's just a random child to us. The scene continues with back and forth cuts between the news broadcast and the child, until the child starts to walk away. So that's the scene we first see Haruka in, but I don't really see that as her actual introduction to players. Her actual introduction is the same scene that Kiryu meets Haruka in for the first time. It starts with a fade to a close-up shot of a sign that reads Bacchus. The camera then pans to an open sign hanging on the door to the building. Kiryu opens the door and we get a ground-level shot of his shoes. Then it cuts to his slightly taken aback face. The next few shots reveal to the audience why Kiryu had that look on his face. We see a bunch of bloody dead bodies everywhere, spread all over the bar. Then, as Kiryu continues to walk further into the room, he notices a child holding a gun and shaking. Now, obviously this little child didn't shoot all of those people, but the scene makes you think that until she clarifies that she found the bar in this condition. To which we can surmise that Haruka walked into this bar, found all of these dead people, and then proceeded to pick a gun up. Imagine this 10-year-old child picking a gun up. That's the Haruka we're introduced to. Yakuza 1 introduces the audience to a child beyond her years. She's a wise ass who asks adults when they stopped believing in Santa Claus after hearing another child who's the same age as her talk about Santa's naughty list.
ねえ、おじさんは何歳までサンタさん信じてた？
え？いや、いくつだ？
Someone who is only 10 years old and has explored one of the most dangerous parts of Tokyo on her own. She knows what a soapland is and tells adults this fact after she swindles them by pretending to be ignorant of what a soapland actually is.
おじさん、ソープって何？
まあ、風呂屋だ。いや、サウナか。俺に振るな。
銭湯ってこと？
いや、それとも少し違って、
おじさんは行ったことあるの？
まあ、いや、
嘘。私どんなとこか知ってるよ。何日も歩いてたんだから。
こりゃ一本取られたな。
Just for the record, soaplands are essentially prostitution businesses that pose as bathhouses. Basically places where people engage in fornication behind the curtain of a legit business, aka somewhere where a child shouldn't be. 99% of 10-year-olds don't even know what the name of the body part between their legs is called. And Haruka went to what amounts to a glorified brothel. Now, hopefully she didn't see anything too inappropriate. Because if you're familiar with Yakuza 1's story, you'd know that the amount of trauma that Haruka has because of what she experiences in this game is damn near incomprehensible. So exposure to sexually inappropriate shit would be the rotten cherry on top of a traumatic cake. Speaking of that, in this game, she is kidnapped on multiple occasions by very scary dudes. She witnesses her mother being shot dead. She's in the middle of an explosion. She witnesses two men violently fight each other with blood and shit flying everywhere. She witnesses Majima threaten to stab a woman at that Shangri-La place. After running away from her orphanage, she wanders around Kamurocho, one of the most dangerous areas in Tokyo. When Kiryu literally meets her for the first time, she's holding a gun surrounded by dead bodies. All these events should have an immense effect on Haruka's mental health. They're all extremely traumatic. The fact that she can still stand on her own 2 feet is a miracle. Remember that for later. In conclusion, in the first game she appears in, she embodies the wise beyond her years trope. That's the person we are introduced to, and by the end of Yakuza 1's story, her mother is no longer alive. And the person she spent the most time with throughout the whole game, Kazama Kiryu, has nothing left to lose either, with his adoptive father, best friend, and longtime romantic interest all dead.
だが、この山で逮捕されたら、もうシャバに出れん。 俺についてこい。もういいんだ、伊達さん。ユミも錦も風間のおやっさんももうみんないない。だから人思いに逮捕してくれ。ふざけるな。お前の戦いはまだ終わってねえはずだ。かけがえのねえものを守り続けろ。逃げるんじゃねえ。かけがえのない。そうだ。
Left with no other option, he wants to go back to jail to live the rest of his life feeling like he has nothing left to live for. But Date-san reminds Kiryu that the child he spent the whole game with is what's worth living for, especially given the fact that her mother is dead now. Going on to say that Haruka can't be left alone or suffer the same fate many other orphans face. Convinced, Kiryu then decides to take guardianship of Haruka. I actually didn't talk about how the relationship between Kiryu and Haruka evolves over the course of the game, so let me do that. Initially, Haruka doesn't put all that much trust in Kiryu after they meet at that bar, but there's a scene where Kiryu demonstrates a strong moral compass after preventing a bunch of street thugs from throwing a stone at a little puppy. They try to throw the stone at the dog, Kiryu catches the stone, and then proceeds to throw it back at them. The look on Haruka's face indicates that there's a change in her attitude towards Kiryu. This specific moment was probably when she realized that Kiryu is a man that she can trust. This is when Kiryu became Uncle Kaz. Over the course of this game, the trust that Haruka has for Kiryu continues to grow. Kiryu becomes a person Haruka feels safe around, and that's why it's so easy for her to accept Kiryu as her guardian at the end of the game. We don't see any resistance from her whatsoever. With that said, let's move on to Yakuza 2. It's been a year since the events of the last game. Kiryu and Haruka seem even more acclimated with each other, judging by the first scene both of them are in. But generally in the game, we see Haruka pushed to the sidelines. At the beginning of the game, Kiryu doesn't even have to tell Haruka that he has to save the Tojo clan once again because it's in shambles. She's just like, you got a job to do now, don't you? Once it's over, come back for me, okay? She literally came to that conclusion on her own, which I think serves as another example of the child beyond her years aspect of her character. A regular old child would have never let Kiryu hear the end of it because normal children are selfish little devils. The other role she plays is, once again, a damsel in distress. She's only kidnapped once in this game, but that would be the third time she's been kidnapped overall in the series up until this point. Again, a child who's been through this is not going to be healthy from a mental perspective without help. It's very traumatic, but I'll say it again, we'll go back to that specific topic later in this video. A topic I probably won't get back to, though, is Kiryu's second love interest. Yeah, in Yakuza 2, he falls in love again. And Haruka is the first to notice it. There's a scene where all three of them are in the same car, and Kiryu's the only one who is asleep. While Kiryu is sleeping, Haruka and Sayama, her name is Sayama, sorry about that, start to talk about Kiryu and his relation to the both of them. And like I said before, Haruka seems to take notice of the fact that Kiryu has taken a liking to Sayama. She knows because she's noticed that Kiryu acts differently around her. She's noticed that Kiryu acts around Sayama the same way he acts around Haruka. He's more open and relaxed. He feels more free to be himself, and these are all Haruka's observations. And that tells us again that the degree of closeness between Haruka and Kiryu is larger than in the first game. There is another interesting moment in this game where Kiryu and Haruka come across an overzealous talent agent who really wants Haruka to join his talent agency so he can develop her as an idol. Which is interesting because it means at this point in the series, which is very early in its lifetime, I mean this game originally came out in 2006, the writers were throwing around the idea of Haruka being an idol. More than 6 years before Yakuza 5 released. And what makes this scene even more interesting is the fact that Haruka demonstrates way more agency in her vehement refusal to be an idol in this game than she does in Yakuza 5, where she's freaking 16 years old. But we're not there yet. Let's stay focused. Don't want to get riled up so early in this video. She literally tells Kiryu that she will run away from Osaka and look for him even if he's all the way in Kamurocho if he forces her to join the talent agency. Now that I think about it, that would make for a pretty dope Yakuza game with Haruka as the main protagonist. A game where Kiryu forces 11-year-old Haruka to become an idol signed to a talent agency in Osaka, but then embarks on a journey through Japan to get to Kamurocho to find Kiryu? You can't tell me that wouldn't be an interesting game. Although I don't know about what the gameplay would look like. Anyway, Haruka also states that she doesn't want to be alone anymore, which I find interesting because it suggests that before she met Kiryu, she was very lonely, even in the Sunflower Orphanage. She goes on to say that she's fine with her life as it is, despite the fact that she's been kidnapped thrice, because at this point she's begun to view Kiryu as family, signifying the fact that they are much closer to each other in this game. Then at the end of the game, when Kiryu and his one-time love interest think they're literally about to die because a bomb at the top of Kamurocho Hills might blow up, his one-time love interest is like, "Poor Haruka, we really failed her." And then he's like, "I'm sure Haruka will understand." They both say that as they begin to make out with one another, and Haruka is just up there in the helicopter bawling her eyes out, hoping Oji-san doesn't die. And yeah, Yakuza 2's ending has to be one of the worst in this series, but at least we got to see a little bit of development in Haruka's character. But yeah, that ending, man, not very classy, Kiryu. Establishing shot of the ocean. Close-up shot of the bay/shore. A wide shot of a palm tree and the ocean. Another wide shot of what seems to be a housing compound and the beach with a little girl sitting in the middle. A medium close-up shot of the girl, her face now recognizable as Haruka. That right there was the first scene in Yakuza 3. And what the first scene in Yakuza 3 tells us is that life is very, very different for Kiryu and Haruka now. This further emphasized by the next scene. In this scene, we see Kiryu and Haruka serve up some food for a bunch of kids. And if you're playing these games in sequential order, then your initial reaction to this would be confusion and a bunch of questions. Who are these kids? Is Kiryu a philanthropist now? Is he on vacation or something? All of these questions are answered, of course, if you continue to play the rest of the game. You'll find out that Kiryu runs an orphanage now with a bunch of kids he's taken in. After the convoluted craziness that was Yakuza 2, he decides to settle down far away from the Yakuza and fulfill a mission of making sure more orphans feel like they're a part of a family. Kind of sorta continuing Kazama's legacy. At least that's why I think he starts the orphanage. So how does Haruka fit into the equation? Well, in this family of orphans, she serves the role of big sister. Which makes sense given the fact that she's, say it with me, a child beyond her years. In this game, she demonstrates a higher level of maturity relative to the other kids. And I think this is further emphasized by the fact that Kiryu and Haruka have this little non-verbal nod acknowledgement they do with each other throughout the game. Like, there will be moments where a conflict between the kids is resolved, and Kiryu will nod to Haruka, and Haruka will nod back. I'm not entirely sure what this acknowledgement is supposed to signify, but my guess would be that Kiryu and Haruka had a really long and mature conversation about the fact that he's going to start an orphanage, and they're going to live with the kids in the orphanage. I don't know what the specific contents of that conversation would have been, but how they resolved the conflict between kids was probably discussed. And Haruka is only like 13 years old in this game, and here she is kind of acting like an adult. Speaking of Kiryu and Haruka, I think in this game their relationship kind of transitions from uncle and niece to quasi-daughter and dad. And that's why Yakuza 3's ending is so traumatic for Haruka. If you don't remember what happens, Kiryu is fucking stabbed in the guts in front of Haruka. Luckily, he survives the stabbing, but we see the effect this traumatic experience has on Haruka in Yakuza 4. Oh, and this game also has Haruka's best moment where she slaps the shit out of Mine, while protecting everyone else in the orphanage behind her. I think this game is the first where Haruka's character is disgustingly disrespected. Let's get straight to it. That scene with Haruka and Saejima is probably one of the worst in gaming. It's extremely weird and inappropriate. There's no adequate or sound justification for it whatsoever. Because there is absolutely nothing you can say to justify drafting, storyboarding, and animating a scene where a man over the age of 40 does what he did to a fucking 14-year-old, it makes it all the more baffling that this was even considered. Not to mention the fact that Kiryu's reaction to what happened is completely out of character. It's like he turned into a different person in this scene. And I know there's idiots who try to rationalize this scene with the painfully contrived excuse that it had been a while since he'd seen a woman, considering the fact that he's been in jail for decades. And this is what I gotta say to those people. Do you not realize that your defense of Saejima actually makes him look worse? Because the implication would then be that he doesn't know how to differentiate between an adult woman and a goddamn child. Not to mention that they could have depicted the fact that it's been a while since he's been in the outside world in a much, much more savory manner, with no pedophilic undertones. And I'll give you an example. I'll come up with one off the top of my head. Saejima wakes up after Haruka leaves the room to go to the kitchen to cook something up. He then proceeds to walk into the living room, sees a flat-screen TV, and is very baffled by it. He proceeds to look for a remote to try to use it, but it turns out he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. As for the cinematography, close-up shot of the TV, then close-up shot of his baffled face, extreme close-up shot of his eyes which move to notice the TV remote, a shot of the whole interior with Saejima walking to the coffee table to fetch the remote. Close-up shot of his hand picking up the remote, a shot of the whole interior again as he walks to sit on the couch and then suddenly he drops the remote. Close-up shot of the remote on the floor, with batteries out of the remote now. High-angle shot of Saejima looking down at the floor as he tries to pick it up. And I think y'all can see where I'm going with this. I literally came up with that on the spot, with no effort whatsoever, and if an amateur like me can do that, the professionals over at RGG most certainly can too. And Haruka is still in this scene I came up with, except she's not disrespected by the writer. All I gotta ask is what the fuck RGG were even thinking, or if it's one person in the team who really wanted this to be a scene. Whoever they are, they need to see Chris Hansen. Anyway, in Yakuza 4, Haruka doesn't play much of a role in the story, but there is somewhat of a character arc for her in this game, where she comes to terms with the fact that Kiryu is willing to forgive Hamazaki, despite the fact that he stabbed Kiryu just over a year ago. And Kiryu doesn't seem to notice or acknowledge that this scene was very traumatic for Haruka. I would say that this conflict remains unresolved, because they never really talk about it again. Yeah, I know there's a phone call that Haruka has with Kiryu at the end of the game, but in that scene, neither of them addressed the fact that what Hamazaki did traumatized Haruka. But yeah, that's really it for Haruka's involvement in Yakuza 4. The next game, Yakuza 5, is the first time since Yakuza 1 where she's a major character. But before we talk about that, I want to tell you a little something about character derailment and character assassination. Ever heard of the website TV Tropes? Well, I'm going to tell you what that website's definition of character derailment is. When an established character becomes largely different, exhibiting behavior contrary to what has previously been shown. Rather than gradually changing in response to events and experiences, a derailed character will exhibit shockingly unusual behavior that implies wrongdoing or incompetence on the part of the writers. Whether it be Tails in the Sonic the Hedgehog series, Brian Griffin from Family Guy, or Gwen, Lashana, Courtney, and Duncan from Total Drama, character derailment always sucks. In published fiction, derailment is usually caused by an author having a certain story idea and needing to stretch the character's personality to fit that story idea. And that's exactly what we see with Haruka Sawamura in the Yakuza series from Yakuza 5 and onwards. Yakuza 5 is a peculiar game. We're not going to talk about the whole game, but I will talk about the theme of dreams, or to be more accurate, Yume. At the end of the previous video, I posed a few questions. What is Haruka's dream? Did she ever have aspirations? Well, the answers to those questions is almost non-existent until Yakuza 5. As you've probably already figured out by now, we never really got to know Haruka as a person throughout these games until Yakuza 5. What are Haruka's hobbies? What's her favorite food? Her favorite subject in school? What does she want to be when she grows up? It's really only in Yakuza 1 that we actually get a peek inside the character, and most of that is related to her mother. In Yakuza 2, she's barely there, but we do learn that she is a fan of idols in that one scene we previously discussed. In Yakuza 3 and 4, she has somewhat of a character arc, but it's nothing of real substance. In Yakuza 5, this changes because in this game, she is a fully playable character. So let's talk about Haruka's dream in Yakuza 5, because it might be the best thing this game does with her character. If you didn't already know, especially considering the fact that I've previously made allusions to this already throughout this video, yes, I can tell when you're not listening, Haruka becomes an idol in Yakuza 5. It's not really something she had a strong desire for, and is mostly imposed on her by the character Mireille Park, the president of the talent agency she's assigned to. I obviously talk about this in the previous video, specifically about Park, so go watch that if you haven't already. I'll give you the gist of it, but please go watch that video for a full-on analysis. As I discussed in that video about Mireille Park plays the role of the mother Haruka never had. She does Haruka's makeup after finding out that Haruka has never had anyone to help her do her own makeup. They go shopping together. They hold each other's hands after seeing a daughter and her mom together. But their relationship is also low-key coercive and almost abusive, given the fact that Park threatens to stop providing financial support to the Morning Glory Orphanage if she doesn't win the Princess League. And that's just one example. I examined this aspect of their relationship more in depth in the Mireille Park video, so make sure you watch that if you want to see more examples of this aspect of their relationship. Now, after Park is murdered, Haruka feels like it is her duty to continue Park's dream and achieve it in honor of her memory, which isn't a drastic change from how she felt about Park when she was alive, but it's still a bit of a surprise given the type of person Park was. But she still nonetheless goes on to achieve Park's dream, which was to have a huge-ass concert in the Tokyo Dome. Now, obviously, a lot happens in between that and a lot of other stuff happens, but we're not here to recap Yakuza 5's whole story. There's a whole ass video essay genre on YouTube that does just that, so go watch those if that's what you came here for. In all seriousness, I'm here to analyze the themes and characterization, so with that in mind, now that we know the premise and general plot outline for Haruka's part in Yakuza 5, let's talk about the song So Much More. If you played Yakuza 5 till the end, you'll know that this song is played ad nauseum in Haruka's part. And yes, it can get really tiring, but one thing I really like about it is the fact that the lyrics actually have thematic substance. They're not just bland pop song filler. Ryusuke Hori legitimately put a lot of effort into writing this song, so we're gonna break it down because it describes really succinctly how Haruka is feeling at this point in the story, and how she feels throughout the story. And of course, it'll be the English translation. I don't think I had to specify that. The first 7 lines read, "This silly dream, this ray of hope, fading faster than scribbles on the pavement. Should I just give in? Is this what you want? Are you good enough? It's all I see when I look in the mirror. I can't escape my own reflection." Now, these first few lines tell us that Haruka is feeling very unsure and is very confused as to whether or not she's comfortable in the current position she's in at this point in the story. She's asking herself if what she's doing is really fulfilling her dreams, if what she's doing is really what she wants to be doing. Basically, it's conveying that she was low-key kind of forced into the position she's in right now and would much rather be home at the Morning Glory Orphanage with her adopted brothers and sisters and Oji-san, of course. Then the last 3 lines specifically tell us that Haruka is also a little bit insecure about the role she's playing right now. She doesn't even want to look at her reflection, and that could be literal or figurative. Figurative in the sense that she doesn't want to face the fact that what she is doing right now is not pursuing her dream, especially if it means renouncing any relation to Kiryu and the Morning Glory kids, further emphasized by the next 6 lines. When my tears won't dry, wanna just not even try, I'll find the strength inside. Hope is all it takes to remake your dreams into reality, so don't let it slip away. These feelings make her want to cry, but then we see a switch in attitude into what seems to be a more motivated and enthusiastic Haruka. The next lines read, "Are you ready? Go! It's your time to show that you're so much more than you could know. Hold your head up high, spread your wings and fly. Just a bit of hope and you'll be shining. It's all up to me, just we wait and see. The star is gonna shine so bright it hurts, and I will prove to you that I can be so much more than what you see right now." I think all those lines convey something very interesting, and keep in mind that this is my interpretation. I think the whole verse is basically portraying a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other situation for Haruka. These lines are where we see a full-on switch to the devil side, where Haruka is basically putting on a facade for the audience, and maybe even for Kiryu, or even Park for that matter. That could come from a place of anger, a stick it to the man type of anger. You could say these lines convey that Haruka is mad at both Kiryu and Park for putting her in this position in the first place, but she's gonna be so much more than what you see right now anyway. The last lines in the song just further emphasize these feelings, the only difference being that the devil has taken full control now, commanding Haruka on what she needs to do. Now that was some really good shit. I swear, Yakuza 5 has so many strokes of greatness, but is way too convoluted and messy for any of it to be coherent. But there's a damn near 10 out of 10 story here if you just look a bit closer. Now, there are 3 other concert songs that Haruka performs, and they all basically convey how she is feeling at the particular points in the story that she performs them. Loneliness Loop is performed after Park dies, just as they were starting to form a connection, emphasizing how disappointed and bereaved she feels about Park's death. The next song she performs in the Princess League is Because I Have You, which is performed in the Princess League finale. And that song could be about either Kiryu or Park. I'd wager that it's more about Kiryu, but if anyone disagrees, feel free to voice why in the comments. And the final song, the Dreamline debut, Dream, or Durim, is basically a daughter-to-father love letter from Haruka to Kiryu. It's a summary of the speech that Haruka gives at the end of the game, basically. A speech in which she says that she can't bear to live a life without Kiryu and the Morning Glory kids, and will thus cease to be an idol. The speech in which she reveals to the whole of Japan that her father is Kazama Kiryu, something that she's been hiding since the beginning of her idol career. Which is a bit stupid and short-sighted on her part now that the whole country knows that your father is a goddamn Yakuza, but who doesn't love a genuine moment of familial love? And after giving the speech, cuts her huge debut concert short by running out of the stadium to find Kiryu. And that is something the real Haruka would do. But do we get to see the real Haruka throughout the whole game? Well, yes and no. In all previous Yakuza games before 5, Haruka was a smartass. She was curious, she was street smart, and she was wise beyond her years. Do we still see that Haruka in Yakuza 5? Well, sometimes we see that part of her, and sometimes we see her demonstrate behaviors that contradict everything we've seen in her character before Yakuza 5. Like, for example, in this game, we see Haruka directly experience bullying. How does she handle it? Well, she's a little bit of a pushover for the most part. She's also lacking the confidence that we saw in her previous depictions. She's meeker and more insecure. But then in that one scene where she buys Park a gift, only to be interrupted by her idol competition, we get to see remnants of the old Haruka.
やめてください。
何？親切で言ってあげてんのに。そのひねくれたところもあのおばさんそっくり。
それ以上社長の悪口言ったら。
言ったら何？
それ以上社長の悪口言ったら許さない。
Yes, that's the Haruka I know.
いいの？うちの事務所ね、その気になればあんたんとこの事務所くらいあっという間に潰せるんだからね。
それが嫌なら今すぐ土下座して謝りなさい。それとも終わってる社長と一緒にあんたもこの世界から消えちゃう？
じゃあ連絡しちゃおう。あんたも社長もこれで終わりね。
やめて。
はあ？
やめてください。
何？口だけ？
But then she backs down for some reason, and the old Haruka would have never done that. She wouldn't need to be saved by Park. She would call their bluff, and would thus expose the fact that they're lying through their teeth. That's what the Haruka I knew would do. But then, in another instance, she agrees to meet a literal Yakuza patriarch at a train station by herself. So Haruka's depiction in this game is kind of all over the place. Now, in terms of the discomfort we see when she deals with creepy-ass fans, that's completely normal. You'd expect an idol, or really any celebrity, to be uncomfortable with fans who are way too touchy and way too willing to overstep boundaries. Even Haruka. I mean, I wouldn't know how to react to creepy-ass fans either. Speaking of those mini-games you play with Haruka, which is where you see her interact with fans, she also has sub-stories in this game, like any other Yakuza protagonist. To put it briefly, almost all of her sub-stories either revolve around typical teenager shit, or her struggles to balance her life as an idol and a girl in high school. So, for some reason, Haruka and Akiyama know each other, and it's never really explained how or why they know each other. We never get a flashback scene explaining how they met or anything of that nature. My guess is that Yokoyama-san and RGG did not have the time to include some sort of scene explaining this. And that's understandable given the fact that Yakuza 5 was only given 2 years of development time, which is absolutely insane, by the way. But it's still very jarring to watch that first scene with Haruka and Akiyama. Nonetheless, Akiyama's dynamic with Haruka very much mimics that of an uncle and a niece. Akiyama plays the role of Uncle Akiyama, or shall I say, Uncle Aki. It's very fun to watch, and I enjoy their interactions. Especially that moment where Haruka throws a fire extinguisher at Kanai to help Akiyama fight him off. Really underrated aspect of Yakuza 5. So, to close this section off, I want to talk about how Haruka and Kiryu's relationship is depicted in Yakuza 5. To start off, they only have 2 scenes with each other in the whole game, and one of them is a flashback. The other is the final scene, which is the post-credit scene. Now, I find this interesting because my guess is that this is intentional and was done purposefully to make the audience really feel the separation that Kiryu and Haruka feel between each other throughout the course of the game's story, which I think makes the experience of playing Yakuza 5 that much more memorable. But sadly, it's also the start of a trend in which scenes with both Haruka and Kiryu are very sparse, and this is even more so the case with Yakuza 6. Speaking of Yakuza 6, let's talk about how Haruka is depicted in Yakuza 6. So, in Yakuza 5, Haruka was still mostly the same character, but she lost some of the confidence and snarkiness that made her unique for her age. Now, some may say that she grew up and matured, and that she got more self-conscious as teenagers usually do. And I agree to disagree with people who make that argument, but anyone that defends Haruka's depiction in Yakuza 6, I vehemently disagree with, because they literally massacred my girl.
Look how they massacred my
girl. So, in Yakuza 6, Haruka is absent for most of the game, because she's in a coma caused by a car accident. But she wasn't in the car accident alone. She was with her baby? Wait a minute. What? Okay, 2 questions. One for the writers and one for Haruka. Number 1. Why do you think this was an appropriate direction to take Haruka's story in? With all the potential she has or had at this point, you've completely quashed it. Number 2. Why the fuck did Haruka not make whoever she was having sex with wear a goddamn condom? Or why did she wear a goddamn condom? Very reasonable questions if you ask me. Let's address number 1 first. In my opinion, this was the wrong direction to take Haruka's story in. To me, by making her a mother, they basically squandered all the potential that she had as a character, because now, for as long as the series exists probably, she'll be constrained to the role of a mother. Just think about it. She could have gone on to be a private vigilante detective operating in the shadows of Okinawa's criminal underground to protect Morning Glory, or she could have been involved in the Ichiban saga in one way or another, maybe helping Ichiban and co. at some point in the story, and I just came up with those ideas off the top of my head. Those 2 ideas I just came up with are a very fitting direction for Haruka's character, in my opinion, of course, because they both get her involved in the criminal world, a world she is very familiar with, and strives to make a better place. But again, that's just my opinion. My point is, none of that potential can actually be realized now. Furthermore, the fact that she got pregnant in the first place is very out of character in my opinion. You're telling me the woman who knew what a soap land was when she was 10 years old didn't take the precaution to wear protection before engaging in coitus? That's unbelievable, and not to mention extremely reckless. And does Haruka really seem like the type to hook up with a person she doesn't know that well? You'd think that Haruka would be cautious with strangers given her experience with the Yakuza, but I guess to her, Yuta seemed like a guy nice enough and attractive enough to fornicate with. That's not the Haruka I know, I don't think. I mean, what's so appealing about this dude anyway?
Dear Paul, 现在的我没酒就没法子跟老爹说话。
I'm not sure if that helps my case. Now, those are the problems I have with Haruka's depiction in Yakuza 6 specifically. What do Yakuza fans generally have to say? Well, most people have a problem with the fact that Haruka makes another really dumb decision, and she does that before the pregnancy. Yakuza 6 begins directly after Yakuza 5's ending, and for most of the prologue, all the loose ends from that game are tied. This includes Haruka finally returning to the orphanage. Here's the problem though. She was literally a famous idol, which means that wherever she goes, she's going to garner attention from both randos and fans, since she's so recognizable. And since the tabloid industry in Japan is so brutal, they try to find every way they can turn her into another scandalous headline. She has to deal with the paparazzi, and now that she's back at the orphanage with her family, they'll be associated with her too, which makes Haruka think that her status as an ex-idol associated with the Yakuza might affect everyone else's ability to achieve their dreams because of their association with Haruka. So, what's Haruka's solution? Well, she just leaves the orphanage. Yeah, that's actually what she does. Instead of addressing the problem head-on, she just up and leaves out of the blue, effectively running away from her problems. Now, that actually sounds familiar. I feel like there's another major Yakuza character who's done that multiple times. Oh yeah, Kiryu! That's basically what Kiryu does in every single Yakuza game. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, am I right? Kiryu taught you well, Haruka. He taught you well. Overall, I understand why fans don't like the fact that Haruka makes that decision at the beginning of the game, but it kind of makes sense. This is probably the only aspect of Haruka's character RGG handles well in Yakuza 6. It's basically her repeating the behaviors she saw her father exhibit, which I think works for a potentially good character arc, but that's not the character arc we got in Yakuza 6, sadly, because every other part of Haruka's depiction in Yakuza 6 is bad. I don't think it was a good idea to make her a mother, and I don't think it was a good idea to derail her character in the process. One thing I haven't mentioned is the fact that Yakuza 6 is basically the last time Kiryu and Haruka see each other again until, presumably, Infinite Wealth's ending.
お母さん、なんでおじいちゃんいないの？大丈夫だよ、ハルト。 おじいちゃんは帰ってきたんだよ。やっとね。
And we don't even get to see that on screen. At the end of Yakuza 6, Kiryu makes the decision to fake his death and thus disappears into the shadows, so his past can never catch up to those he loves, once again. Now, if you've played Yakuza 6, you would know that this contradicts the game's message, but we're not going to get into that right now. All you need to know is that Kiryu, time and time again, has learnt that he can't just run away from his problems, and this is a central theme in Yakuza 6, but that's essentially what he does at the end of Yakuza 6, and in doing that, he makes his whole family, including Haruka, think that he's dead. And from then on, Haruka strives to continue raising Haruto, the name of her child, along with the rest of the orphanage and his father. And that's basically how Haruka's whole character arc ends. After everything she's been through, from kidnapping after kidnapping, a career in the idol industry, witnessing her adoptive father stabbing, weird sub-stories, whatever the fuck Saejima was doing to her in Yakuza 6, a murder mystery with Akiyama, and an extremely tumultuous backstory on how she was conceived and what happened thereafter. I mean, does anyone remember that her father was literally a powerful and influential politician?
Jingu. Kisama.
悔しいだろ。
Yeah, I don't think Haruka or Kiryu remember either. But yeah, this is where her story ends, raising a child she conceived at 19 years old. If that isn't character assassination, I don't know what is. But if you disagree with my assessment, you're free to voice your opinion in the comments. Let's argue about it and have fun.